The sirens were deafening. The smell of smoke filled the air as chaos unfolded in the small suburban neighborhood. Cars rushed down the narrow streets, families packed their belongings, and people shouted to one another over the roar of the wind. The wildfire had spread faster than anyone expected. Within minutes, the entire area was under mandatory evacuation. Inside a modest yellow house at the end of the road, a brown Labrador named Max paced anxiously by the door. His tail wagged weakly, uncertain, as his family hurried through the house, stuffing clothes, photos, and documents into bags. He could sense the panic, the fear, but he didn't understand it. He only knew that something terrible was happening and that his family was scared. "Come on, hurry," the father shouted, lifting boxes toward the car. The mother grabbed the kids' hands and rushed them outside. Max barked, circling their feet, waiting for someone to grab his leash, to say those familiar words, "Let's go, boy," but no one did. The mother turned back once, her eyes wide and tearful. She hesitated, looking at Max, who stood at the door, his head tilted, eyes pleading. But the smoke was getting closer, the wind howled, and someone shouted that the road was closing. "We'll come back for him," she cried, her voice cracking as she was pulled toward the car. The door slammed shut, and Max was left standing behind it. He pressed his nose against the wood, whining softly, his tail slowly lowering. Outside, he could hear the engine start, the car pulling away. The rumble faded, leaving only silence and the distant crackle of fire. Hours passed. The sky turned red. Embers drifted through the air like deadly snowflakes. Max stayed by the door, waiting. Every sound made his ears perk, the whine of a siren, the bark of a distant dog, the echo of tires on asphalt. Each time, hope surged through his chest. They're coming back. They promised. But they didn't. When the night came, the power went out. The only light came from the glow of fire creeping along the horizon. The air inside the house was thick with heat and smoke. Max coughed, pacing back and forth. His water bowl was empty. His paws trembled on the wooden floor. Still, he refused to move from the door. That was where they left, and that was where they'd return. By morning, the flames had reached the edge of the yard. The windows rattled with the force of the wind. Max whimpered, curling into a ball beside the door, his fur coated in ash. He licked the small photo that had fallen from the shelf, a family portrait showing him between the two children, smiling wide. He didn't understand why they weren't back yet. He only knew that he couldn't leave without them. Then, just when the fire's heat became unbearable, a voice pierced through the chaos. "There's one in here." A firefighter in a heavy jacket burst through the back door. Max lifted his head weakly, tail twitching once. The firefighter's flashlight caught the glint of Max's eyes. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice gentle. "It's okay, you're safe now." Max tried to stand, but his legs buckled. The man dropped to his knees, wrapping the trembling dog in a wet blanket and lifting him into his arms. Max whimpered softly, nuzzling his rescuer's neck, his body limp with exhaustion. As they stepped outside, the house behind them cracked and groaned, flames consuming the roof. Outside, other firefighters shouted instructions. The rescuer carried Max to a waiting truck, where paramedics sprayed his fur with cool water and gave him oxygen through a small mask. Max's eyes fluttered, his chest rising and falling slowly. When he opened them again, he wasn't looking at the fire, he was looking at the road, the one his family had driven down. Even as the world burned, he still waited for them. Days later, the fires were finally contained. The rescue team took Max to an animal shelter, where volunteers treated his burns and fed him carefully. He was weak but alive. Every day, he sat by the door of his kennel, tail tapping the floor, eyes scanning the people who came and went. The staff called him the Watcher, because he always faced the same direction, toward the entrance, as if waiting for someone to walk through it. Weeks passed. His family never came. One morning, a volunteer named Rachel knelt by his kennel. She had been the one to feed him every day, whispering softly through the bars. "Hey, Max," she said gently. "You're still waiting, huh?" He wagged his tail faintly, his eyes filled with quiet hope. Rachel bit her lip. She had checked the registry, no one had claimed him. Maybe they lost everything in the fire. Maybe they thought he hadn't made it. Either way, he was alone now. That day, Rachel opened the kennel door and sat beside him on the floor. "You don't have to wait anymore," she said softly. "You're safe now." Max leaned into her, resting his head on her lap. It was the first time he'd allowed himself to rest without watching the door. Over the next few days, Rachel visited more often. She brought him soft blankets, small toys, and long walks outside under the bright sky. The first time the sunlight hit his face after so long, he froze, eyes wide, nose twitching. The warmth was strange but familiar. Slowly, his tail began to wag again. It was as if he was remembering what freedom felt like. One evening, as Rachel locked up, she saw Max still sitting by the door, but this time he wasn't watching for the past. He was watching her. She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Come on, let's go home," she whispered. The next morning, Rachel signed the adoption papers. When she opened her car door, Max climbed in without hesitation, his tail thumping happily. As they drove away, he looked out the window, ears perked, the wind brushing through his fur. The scars were still there, faint marks of the fire that tried to take him, but his spirit was whole again. When they reached her small farmhouse, Rachel opened the door and said, "This is your new home, Max." He trotted inside, sniffing the air, circling once before lying down near the front door. Rachel smiled. Some habits die hard, but for the first time, he wasn't waiting for someone to return. He was guarding the place where love had found him again. That night, the sky was calm. No smoke, no sirens, just silence and stars. Rachel sat beside him, gently brushing his fur. Max sighed deeply, his head resting on her knee, and as he drifted to sleep, she whispered, "You're home now, boy." And this time, he believed it.